The strangest thing about my wife's return from the dead was how other people reacted. We were strolling through Belvedere Square, for instance, on an early spring afternoon when we met our old next-door neighbor, Jim Rust. "Well, what do you know?" he said to me. "Aaron!" Then he noticed Dorothy beside me. She stood peering up at him with one hand shielding her forehead from the sun. His eyes widened, and he turned to me again. I said, "How's it going, Jim?" Visibly, he pulled himself together. "Oh, great," he said. "I mean, or rather, but of course we miss you. Neighborhood is not the same without you." He was focusing on me alone, specifically on my mouth, as if I were the one who was talking. He wouldn't look at Dorothy. He had pivoted a few inches so as to exclude her from his line of vision. I took pity on him. I said, "Well, tell everybody hello." And we walked on. Beside me, Dorothy gave one of her dry chuckles. Other people pretended not to recognize either one of us. They would catch sight of us from a distance, and this sort of jolt would alter their expressions, and they would all at once dart down a side street, busy, much to accomplish, very important concerns on their minds. I didn't hold it against them. I knew this was a lot to adjust to. In their position, I might have behaved the same way. I like to think I wouldn't, but I might have. The ones who made me laugh aloud were the ones who had forgotten she'd died. Granted, there were only 2 or 3 of those, people who barely knew us. In line at the bank once, we were spotted by Mr. Von Sant, who had handled our mortgage application several years before. He was crossing the lobby and he paused to ask, "You two still enjoying the house?" "Oh, yes," I told him, just to keep things simple. I pictured how the realization would hit him a few minutes later. "Wait," he would say to himself as he was sitting back down at his desk. "Didn't I hear something about—" Unless he never gave us another thought, or hadn't heard the news in the first place. He'd go on forever assuming that the house was still intact, and Dorothy still alive, and the 2 of us still happily, unremarkably married. I had moved in by then with my sister, who lived in our parents' old place in North Baltimore. Was that why Dorothy came back when she did? She hadn't much cared for Nandina. She thought she was too bossy. Well, she was too bossy. Is. She's especially bossy with me, because I have a couple of handicaps. I may not have mentioned that. I have a crippled right arm and leg. Nothing that gets in my way, but you know how older sisters can be. Oh, and also a kind of speech hesitation, but only intermittently. I seldom even hear it myself. In fact, I have often wondered what made Dorothy select the moment she did to come back. It wasn't immediately after she died, which is when you might expect. It was months and months later. Almost a year. Of course, I could have just asked her, but somehow, I don't know, the question seemed impolite. I can't explain exactly why. One time we ran into Irene Lance from my office. She's the design person there. Dorothy and I were returning from lunch, or I had had lunch at least, and Dorothy had fallen into step beside me as I was walking back. And suddenly we noticed Irene approaching from St. Paul. Irene was hard to miss. She was always the most elegant woman on the street. Not that that was much of a challenge in Baltimore, but she would have seemed elegant anywhere. She was tall and ice blonde, wearing a long flowing coat that day with the collar turned up around her throat and the hemline swirling about her shins in the brisk spring breeze. I was curious. How would a person like Irene handle this type of thing? So I slowed my pace, which caused Dorothy to slow hers, and by the time Irene caught sight of us, we were almost at a standstill, both of us waiting to see what Irene would do. 2 or 3 feet away from us, she stopped short. "Oh, my God," she said. We smiled. "UPS," she said. I said, "What?" "I phoned UPS for a pickup, and there's nobody in the office." "Well, never mind. We're heading back there right now," I told her. I used the word "we" on purpose, although Dorothy would most likely depart before I entered the building. But all Irene said was, "Thanks, Aaron. I must be getting Alzheimer's." And off she went, without another word.